Tonight, he's going to prison for the rest of his life. The judge sentences Bernard Madoff to 150 years for ripping off investors in the biggest Wall Street fraud ever.
I think justice was done today for Mr. Madoff.
I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, what happens to Michael Jackson's children and fortune? Jackson's mother wins at least temporary guardianship and asks to be named administrator of his estate. The Supreme Court rules in favor of white firefighters in New Haven in a major reverse discrimination case. And a prescription for a broken heart, using a heart's own stem cells to heal itself.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. It's the biggest return Bernard Madoff ever got on an investment. For all the years he invested in his giant Ponzi scheme, he's drawn the maximum sentence. Here in New York today, a federal judge ordered Madoff to prison for a century and a half. And with no parole in the federal system, that is a life sentence for the man behind the $65 billion fraud, the biggest in Wall Street history. Armin Katayan begins our coverage of the sentence and the reaction.
Dressed in a dark gray suit, a pale, visibly thinner Madoff sat silent in a packed courtroom as 9 of his victims unleashed their anger. One called him a beast, another a psychopath, another stating, "I only hope this prison sentence is long enough that his jail cell becomes his coffin." Then it was time for the 71-year-old disgraced financier to speak. Devoid of emotion, Madoff first spoke of his immediate family, none of whom were in attendance. "How do you excuse lying to your brother and 2 sons?" he asked. "How do you excuse lying and deceiving a wife who stood by you for 50 years and still stands by you?" Citing what he called an error of judgment, Madoff said, "As hard as I tried, the deeper I dug myself in a hole. I lived in a tormented state," he added, "knowing the pain and suffering I have created. I have left behind a legacy of shame to my family and grandchildren." Turning toward his victims, Madoff said simply, "I am sorry. I know that doesn't help you." District Court Judge Denny Chin was next. Calling Madoff's crimes extraordinarily evil, Chin noted he had not received even a single note or letter in support of Madoff. Then, as Madoff stood silent, Chin delivered the ruling everyone was waiting for. 150 years in prison, the absolute maximum, with no possibility for parole.
It's not the judge's job to dispense justice in this fashion. Sure, you're supposed to make a symbol out of Bernard Madoff. This could have been accomplished with a much shorter sentence.
Afterward, outside the court, several victims had this to say.
"I'm left with fear. I wake up in the night, I get up with it in the morning."
He's an equal opportunity destroyer.
I think justice was done today for Mr. Madoff.
Should have been in a jumpsuit, as the other common criminals walk in there.
And then there's 91-year-old Ian Thierman. He had to take a job at a grocery store in California after losing $700,000 to Madoff.
It's just maybe makes some people feel better. It doesn't make me feel 1 ounce better.
For Bernard L. Madoff, Judgment Day began with much of the same kind of atmosphere seen last March when he pleaded guilty to 11 counts of securities fraud, money laundering, and other federal crimes. Crimes unimaginable just last summer when Madoff was seen as a wizard of Wall Street, praised for his uncanny ability to seemingly see into the future. Now, in his day of reckoning, that future is certain. A lifetime of hard time. A sentence so many believe the king of cons richly deserves. Armin Katayan, CBS News, New York.
Madoff has admitted he never actually invested the money entrusted to him by more than 8,000 people and organizations. They lost tens of billions of dollars, in many cases everything they had. As for Madoff's wife, she was forced to give up her share of her husband's fraudulent wealth, and Jeff Glore tells us she turned on him today.
I have no comments at this time on any subject.
This was Ruth Madoff 1 month ago. She wouldn't speak to CBS News then, but did break her silence today in a statement saying, "My reluctance to speak has been interpreted as indifference or lack of sympathy, which is exactly the opposite of the truth." She did not appear at her husband's sentencing, but went so far as to group herself with the victims. "Like everyone else, I feel betrayed and confused," she said. "The man who committed this horrible fraud is not the man whom I've known for all these years." While both husband and wife insist Bernie Madoff acted alone, The Cohen family lost everything and don't buy it.
I think absolutely Ruth Madoff was involved.
In fact, questions surround the entire family. Brother Peter was the company's chief compliance officer. Bernie Madoff's sons, Andrew and Mark, were in charge of trading at the firm and got millions in loans from their father. All deny knowledge of the fraud. As does Ruth, who recently gave up $80 million in property, holding on to $2.5 million, with the hope of avoiding prosecution.
He seems to be going out of his way to try to protect his family.
Right. How about protecting ours?
Yes, how about it?
Former prosecutor Elizabeth Crotty says if Madoff is lying to save his family, it won't work.
If the family members have paperwork that indicates that they were intimately involved, then they will be called to task.
Is it in any way reasonable to think that Bernie Madoff could do something like this all by himself?
I don't think it's reasonable.
Madoff's chief financial officer, Frank DePascali, is reportedly negotiating with prosecutors to cut a deal. So is his accountant, David Freeling, the only other man facing criminal charges.
In the end, with Madoff insisting that no one else was involved, his family was not involved, it would likely take prosecutors just sifting through decades of evidence to figure out if the man who no one trusts right now is telling the truth. Katie?
Jeff, what is your sense at this point? Do the authorities think the family knew what was going on or not?
Well, they're just not saying right now. We mentioned Peter Madoff, the chief compliance officer and Bernie's brother. They're looking at him. But if they charge him or Ruth or the kids, it'll likely be at least another year before this investigation is complete, Katie.
All right, Jeff Glor. Jeff, thanks very much. Turning now to the Michael Jackson case. Investigators from the Los Angeles County coroners went to his rented mansion today. They left with 2 large plastic bags containing undisclosed medications as they look for clues in the pop star's death. And Jackson's father said he expects results soon from a second private autopsy. Until then, no plans for a funeral will be announced. Meanwhile, Ben Tracy tells us questions remain about what happens to Jackson's children and his financial empire.
These new photos seem to show a healthy-looking Michael Jackson rehearsing for his upcoming concert tour just 2 days before he died. Questions about what caused his death remain. Meanwhile, a potential legal battle is brewing over the fate of his 3 children. 79-year-old Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, filed court papers today and was granted temporary guardianship. The document states that the children have a long-established relationship with paternal grandmother and are comfortable in her care. Her husband, Joe Jackson, echoed those sentiments this morning.
We love those kids too. We're going to take care of them and give them the education they're supposed to have.
But Michael Jackson's former wife, Debbie Rowe, is the biological mother of 2 of the children. Prince Michael, age 12, and Paris Catherine, age 11. It's not clear whether Rowe wants custody.
The court has to give preference to the parent, the biological parent. However, if that is not in the best interest of the child, the court does not have to follow that.
Jackson's youngest son, Prince Michael II, also known as Blanket, is 7 years old. Court records today list his mother as none. Jackson friend Elle Malnick says the singer wanted him to care for Blanket, and the children's longtime nanny says she considers Michael's kids her babies.
She's a good friend of the family and good friends with the kids.
She told my baby, she looked at me. The free-spending singer is believed to have $400 million in debt, but his assets, mainly his 2 song catalogs, are estimated to be worth up to $1 billion. Today, Jackson's mother requested control of his estate. The court will rule on that later. The court filing claims Jackson may have died without a will. His biographer says during his life, the megastar purposely kept his family out of the loop.
So now that Michael is gone, the family finds itself in a great disadvantage because they really don't know much about his finances or his personal life.
Yet celebrity website TMZ, which broke the news of Jackson's death, says one of the singer's former lawyers claims to have a will signed by Michael Jackson. The investigation into how he died continues. This weekend, Jackson's personal doctor told police he found the singer with a faint pulse last Thursday and tried to save him with CPR. He says he did not inject Michael Jackson with painkillers that morning. And Janet Jackson broke her silence, making a surprise appearance on last night's BET Awards show.
To you, Michael is an icon. To us, Michael is family. and he will forever live in all of our hearts.
Now, there have been widely circulated reports that Michael Jackson's body was riddled with needle wounds, that he was nearly bald, and that he weighed just 112 pounds when he died. But today, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office said most of that information is false. Also this afternoon, the promoter of those concerts Michael Jackson was going to put on in London this summer said fans will get a refund if they don't want their money back. Instead, they could get their ticket to the show as a souvenir. Katie?
Ben Tracy. Ben, thanks very much. Now turning to Washington and a major ruling from the Supreme Court in a closely watched reverse discrimination case. In a 5-4 decision, the justices said white firefighters in New Haven, Connecticut were illegally denied promotions because of their race. Wyatt Andrews tells us that overturns a ruling upheld by Supreme Court nominee Sonia Sotomayor.
It was worth it. Every minute of it. Right, guys?
Yeah. 6 years of frustration turned into joy in New Haven as 20 white firefighters, including one Hispanic, celebrated an historic victory. In a groundbreaking decision, the Supreme Court ruled the city had discriminated against them and violated the Civil Rights Act by denying them promotions based on race.
We always believed that the civil rights laws as they existed protected these men from such blatant race discrimination.
The ruling focused on New Haven's decision to throw out its 2003 promotional exam for firefighters when no blacks made the cut for promotion. The city then said no one gets promoted, including the whites. In a close 5-4 decision, the court's swing vote, Anthony Kennedy, sided with conservatives and wrote, "This express race-based decision-making is prohibited." And even if the city was trying to protect minorities against an unfair test, Kennedy wrote, "There's no substantial basis in evidence this test was deficient."
A new set of rules was introduced.
New Haven's mayor said he would respect the decision, but complained the city was obeying 38 years of civil rights law, forbidding anything that caused a disparate impact against minorities.
The city was damned if they did and damned if they didn't.
Civil rights leaders also predicted an era of confusion over when minorities are protected and when they are not.
I think it hurts the cause of having a discrimination-free workplace.
And yet, to the white firefighters, this ruling says discrimination works both ways.
I think that this is just proof positive that people should be treated as individuals and not statistics.
The ruling also cuts both ways for the Supreme Court's nominee, Judge Sonia Sotomayor. Opponents called today's ruling a legal rebuke of her lower court opinions that the whites had no case, but opponents say that she was on solid ground. She was following case law at the time. Katie?
Wyatt Andrews at the Supreme Court tonight. Wyatt, thank you. Now, the justices' writings rarely contain poetry, but they did today. David Souter's last day on the court. In a farewell letter, his colleagues wrote, "We understand your desire to return to your land of easy win, where love and need are one." Both lines from Robert Frost. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, a CBS News exclusive, a treatment that could allow a damaged heart to repair itself. You'll meet the first patient to have this potentially life-saving procedure. Now to matters of the heart and what could be a major advance in treating a damaged heart. Every year, more than 1 million Americans have a heart attack, and those who survive often live on with scarred or weakened hearts. Tonight, Bill Whitaker has exclusive news about a procedure that may allow a heart to repair itself.
Take your pulse here, okay?
It was mid-May when 39-year-old Ken Millis was blindsided by a serious heart attack and the doctor's bad news.
When he told me that there was permanent damage and that the duration of my life was reduced, that, freaked me out.
Especially since the construction company employee has a wife and 2 teenage boys.
I'm not ready to go yet.
You smile, you're in pictures.
So he volunteered to be one of 24 recent heart attack patients in a cutting-edge clinical trial at the Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute, becoming the first person ever to get an infusion of his own heart stem cells.
And we seek to actually reverse
the injury that's been caused by the heart attack by regrowing new heart muscle to at least partially replace the scar that's formed.
Doctors are using stem cells, the body's master cells, because they can transform into different kinds of tissue.
These cells that we're putting in come from the heart itself and are predestined to generate heart muscle and blood vessels.
Other types of stem cells, like bone marrow, have been studied for heart repair, but with mixed results. Animal studies indicate heart stem cells do a better job. Problem is, the heart has so few stem cells, researchers have to grow more. Using local anesthesia, doctors first send a catheter with little pincers to snip out bits of healthy heart tissue. They send the pieces to the laboratory where they're coaxed to manufacture as many as 25 million stem cells. In a trailblazing procedure, new cells grow spontaneously from the specimens, eventually forming into clusters called cardiospheres that can even start beating in the dish. These spew out cells like crazy, stem cells plus other nourishing heart cells. In 4 to 6 weeks, there are millions. You're infusing cells? A few days ago, doctors went back up an artery to deposit Ken Millis's own laboratory-grown stem and support cells into the damaged area of his heart, hoping it'll repair itself and pump more blood.
If this works, it's going to help so many people. It's going to change everything.
In 6 months, doctors will know if Ken's heart has begun to repair itself. If all goes well, clinical trials should be completed in 3 to 4 years. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
When we come back, Iraqis take responsibility for their own security, but can they handle it? Lara Logan on patrol in Iraq's most dangerous city. A big milestone today for U.S. forces in Iraq. They completed their pullout from major cities there. Tomorrow is a national holiday, and in Baghdad, the party started early. Thousands turned out for a concert by Iraqi musicians who have returned from exile. But amid the celebration, there's also concern. Outside Mosul, a car bomb today killed 10 people. And in fact, throughout Iraq, more than 250 have been killed in attacks in the past week as insurgents try to undermine the government. Our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Lara Logan, went on one of the final patrols by U.S. troops in Mosul.
U.S. troops have been battling al-Qaeda on the streets of Mosul for years. The fight for control of Iraq's third largest city, documented by U.S. soldiers and by insurgents. Under pressure in Baghdad last year, al-Qaeda moved north, making Mosul the most dangerous city in Iraq. But from tomorrow on, U.S. combat troops have to be out of Mosul and every other Iraqi town and city, part of a security agreement with the Iraqi government.
If we've coordinated for a patrol, the Iraqis have said we'd like you to accompany us, and the Iraqi security force escorts don't show up, we don't go.
That means Colonel Valesky's men will no longer be able to gather this kind of intelligence unless they're invited by the Iraqis. Here they're scanning a prisoner's iris and will add his information to a U.S. database of suspects, a vital tool in disrupting al-Qaeda.
So this area is much more secure now than when you got here?
Yes.
But al-Qaeda is not defeated?
No.
They haven't gone away?
No.
And it's still...
Will they ever?
On some of their last patrols in the city before the June 30th deadline, the soldiers heard from Iraqi civilians. We expect things will get better when the Americans pull back, this man said. We want our army here, another added.
It's clear from speaking to people here that they've had enough of being occupied, and they're eager to see control of their country back in Iraqi hands. But this city is also where the main fight against al-Qaeda and their allies is still being fought. And off camera, several senior Iraqi officers told us they would have liked to have U.S. soldiers on the city streets with them for another 6 months. You think al-Qaeda will keep attacking the Iraqi army?
Attack Iraqi army, Iraqi government, civilian Iraqi.
Iraqi forces can still call on U.S. troops for help, but they're under tremendous political pressure to show they can secure this country's cities on their own. Lara Logan, CBS News, Mosul.
President Obama said today a weekend coup in Honduras was not legal and leftist President Manuel Zelaya should be reinstated. Today, thousands protested outside the presidential palace, but the military used tear gas to turn them back. Zelaya met today in Nicaragua with other Central American leaders who vow to support him. We'll be right back. Once again, our top story, admitted swindler Bernard Madoff is going to prison for the rest of his life. A federal judge in New York sentenced him today to the maximum 150 years for pulling off the biggest Wall Street fraud in history, a Ponzi scheme that cost unwitting investors an estimated $65 billion, in many cases their life savings. So Madoff takes his place with the likes of Dillinger, Capone, and Sutton as one of the most notorious criminals in U.S. history. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.